Blake Toppmeyer with John Adams of the USA Today Network, coming to you from Hoover, Alabama. After day 3 at SEC Media Days, we got started today by hearing from Alabama coach Nick Saban. John, there aren't too many things that could trump Saban's turn at Media Days, but one of the few things that can, it's conference realignment talk. And it just a little bit ago, report from the Houston Chronicle that Texas and Oklahoma have expressed interest in potentially joining the SEC. I like the idea. Just a quick, short-term reaction, immediate reaction. I like the idea of a 16-team SEC mega conference that would include Texas and Oklahoma if this were to come to pass. What do you think about the thought of Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC?
Oh, I think it would be great. We were just talking about this yesterday, and I was saying how I would love to see Oklahoma in the SEC. The program brings just so much tradition. Of course, Texas does too, but Oklahoma's had a longer run of success than Texas has recently. Sooners play exciting football. Love the Sooner Schooner. It would just be a great addition to the SEC. You put Oklahoma and Texas in it. It's already the best football conference in America, but then it would just kind of lap the field. There wouldn't be any. It would be no discussion about who has the best conference. And I think maybe everybody else would be wanting to join then too.
I think it's interesting. We're about 10 years from the last major round of conference realignment. Missouri joined the league in 2012 along with Texas A&M. We heard from Jimbo Fisher today shortly after that Houston Chronicle report published. Jimbo was asked about Texas and Oklahoma wanting to join the SEC, and Jimbo said, well, I bet they would. And Texas A&M reportedly would like to remain the only Texas school in the SEC, but of course they have one voice, but not the only voice in that. I think it's very interesting to see, 10 years after the last round of conference realignment, it has to be a little bit humbling for Texas and Oklahoma, but especially Texas, to kind of approach the SEC here and say, do you have any room for us here in your grand party? We're maybe not liking our situation so much here anymore. Can you squeeze us in there? Maybe we can play nice with Texas A&M after all in the SEC.
Yeah, ironically, would be even better because Texas A&M has already gained admittance, and Texas for so many years, that was such a long-standing rivalry. But it was never a rivalry of equals. Texas fans always looked down on the Aggies. There was actually an Aggies joke book that was published. So, yeah, I think it would be very humbling to sort of apply for membership. Would it make it have to apply for membership? I think if it did have to apply, it went through an interview process. They'd have to interview with all the other league teams and tell us why you want to be in this league and what you could offer us. But I think the SEC, it's pretty big in its own right. It's got a lot of, it's not easily humbled itself, but I don't think it should look down on Oklahoma or Texas. And if there were any way it could add Oklahoma and Texas, I mean, really, those would be bigger additions than any team they've enjoyed in recent years, going back to in 92 with South Carolina and Arkansas. Oklahoma and Texas are unmatched in tradition and success compared to those other teams.
I thought it was interesting. We heard today from both Nick Saban and Jimbo Fisher, being that those are the two teams expected to be 1-2 in the West, and A&M is the believed to be the biggest threat to Alabama in the West, in so much that there is a threat to Alabama in the West. But Jimbo was asked about his comment from a couple months ago, in which he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that he planned to thump Nick Saban's backside when the teams meet in October this season in Texas, in College Station. And Jimbo Fisher did not back away from that comment. He said he doesn't regret it, and that's what he's here for, is to take on Alabama and take on all comers, and he respects Nick Saban, but he's going out there to win. Anything you heard today from Jimbo surprise you? Were you surprised that he sort of doubled down on that? And anything you heard that makes you think maybe Texas A&M could actually beat Alabama?
No, I wasn't surprised that he didn't back down. I mean, I would have been disappointed if he did back down. I hate it when people make a controversial statement and then they back away from it as soon as they get a lot of publicity from it, and they back off it. And Jimbo stuck with it as well. He should have. I don't think Nick Saban's shaking in his coaching shoes. Alabama versus Texas A&M last season was not a close game. It was a 4-touchdown game. And I know Alabama lost, but a lot of players, but on offense in particular, but A&M lost its quarterback. So, I don't think Alabama worries a whole lot about Texas A&M. Nick Saban was talking today. He was asked if he addressed his team any differently in preparing for a good team or lesser team. And of course, every coach will say the same thing, but I thought it was very genuine in that he said, we're worried about Alabama, basically. I'm paraphrasing. We're worried about Alabama. We want to play to a certain standard. That's what coaches of all dynasties say. They don't worry about the other team because they know with all the good players we've recruited, with all we have going for us, with all our success in big games, if we hit our standards, it's going to hit our standard. It will be really difficult to beat us. And in some cases, even come close to them.
This 4-day event will wrap up tomorrow. John and I will be elaborating on our thoughts on this report of Texas and Oklahoma's interest in joining the SEC in our podcast, SEC Football Unfiltered. You can find that tomorrow morning. John, we heard from 4 coaches today on day 3. Another one that we heard from Mississippi State coach Mike Leach. Of course, Mike Leach is made for this type of event. His deadpan humor, he's made for these viral video clip moments. He's exactly the type of personality that tends to stand out at this type of event. You asked him an interesting question about Tennessee's interest in him as a candidate during its 2017 coaching search. Tennessee's then athletic director, John Curry, flew out to meet with Mike Leach during that coaching search. Of course, Curry was then fired before he could complete the search, and Mike Leach was not ultimately hired by Tennessee. But what did you think of the way that Mike Leach responded to that and his turn on stage today?
Well, I actually was not sure if I should even ask him because that's a few years ago, and he might have just said, well, I don't want to talk about other programs or what's happened in the past when I was at Washington State. But he's not he doesn't give you typical answers. So he basically said what he felt, and he was very aware of what was going on at Tennessee, and he just said, well, I talked to Tennessee. We never nailed anything down, and then there was a coup d'etat at Tennessee, and he's talking about Philip Fulmer, who had been appointed special advisor to the president. He kind of angled his way in there, and he persuaded the chancellor, Beverly Davenport, who was very malleable, to ditch John Curry. I mean, his search was going terribly at the time, but he just went out to Washington. He went out in search of Mike Leach as sort of a Hail Mary, and she replaced Fulmer. She replaced Curry with Fulmer, and it was just kind of a mess there. And as Mike Leach said, as far as the coup d'etat went, I wasn't in the coup d'etat, and lucky me.
Yeah, very, very interesting to hear him offer his thoughts on his place in what was a very memorable, wild, and wacky 2017 coaching search at Tennessee. This event wraps up tomorrow. For all the coverage as this winds down, you can find it throughout the USA Today network for news, analysis, and commentary.